Hello, viewers. Thanks for stopping by. Hunter x Hunter has long been a staple of this channel. I'm so grateful to you all for helping me peer pressure Hoodie into watching this masterpiece all those years ago. But we haven't visited the series in far too long, if you ask me. And we are both very hyped to hear the news about updates to the manga being on the way. So I thought we could do a fun video to get people arguing in the comments. And this is a rather fun matchup because both of these characters are beloved by the fans. They've been enemies and worked together in the past, but we never really know if Hisoka will end up being friend or foe. That's kinda his dynamic. It's actually consistent with the familiar version of his character to say that if Kurapika becomes a good match for him in his estimation, then Hisoka will go out of his way to make a fight happen between them. Why am I justifying myself to you? I know I'm not the only one who wants this. And it might actually happen before we reach the Dark Continent. I'm Zero, this is Kato, and today, let's talk about Kurapika vs. Hisoka. Today's video is brought to you by Hoodie's new webcomic, The King's Way. For many, basketball is a fun game they played as a kid. For some, it's an event to bet money on. But for the few with enough talent, drive, and need, basketball is an opportunity. In their final year of high school, Kingsley Wei and Manu Khan must overcome the demanding worlds of family, school, and romance while trying not to lose their love for the sport along the way. Will they defy the odds and become great, or crumble under the weight of expectations? The King's Way is a sports drama that blends the exhilarating athletics of anime like Slam Dunk and Kuroko no Basket with the complex relationships of a seinen love story. You can read the first 3 episodes now on Webtoon Canvas or watch the dub trailer on our very own YouTube channel. Links to everything will be in the description. As I said, I think this will be a fun fight. But Zero, I hear you typing. Hunter x Hunter isn't DBZ. Fights aren't decided by who has the bigger power level. First of all, watch the Buu Saga. Secondly, we all know that this fight would actually be decided by context. In other words, who the author wants to win. But we can give Togashi a little more credit than that, can't we? We can assume there's enough continuity in this series that we can actually pick a favorite in this matchup. So in lieu of power levels, how will I decide who the favorite is? Well, I think in any universe you can essentially boil down a fight to 4 elements. First, physicality. This is the first umbrella category. It refers to things like physical strength, speed, endurance, and stamina, and it also relates to nen volume. Second, intelligence. The second umbrella category. This includes attributes such as knowledge, strategic thinking, observational skills, etc. Third, mastery of anime magic, in this case, nen. This category is solely about how well the individual uses the magic system. If you're looking at a universe with what we consider grounded fighters and no actual magic system, this category would be replaced with mastery of skills, such as proficiency with weapons and martial arts. Fourth, understanding of nen. This category is solely about how well one understands the mechanics of the magic system in a broader context. This category can be closely tied with the last one, but the distinction becomes clearer in the context of Hunter x Hunter. So let's get into it and discuss who would win before Hisoka's big power-up. Assume anything from the anime is fair game, but we'll be leaving manga spoilers for the tail end of this video. Even just taking a look at the anime, we have plenty of data for Hisoka, with his eventual participation in the Hunter exam— with his eventful participation in both the Hunter exam and Heaven's Arena, as well as the dodgeball game on Greed Island. Let's start with that dodgeball game. So here we see Hisoka's athleticism definitely get pushed to its limits, when he arguably receives the most serious injuries we've seen him take in the show. I of course refer to when 2 of his fingers and probably almost half the bones in his hands were broken by an attack from one of Razor's nen henchmen. Henchnen. Sorry. Anyway, it's rare for Hisoka to actually take damage that inhibits his ability to fight. And this injury did exactly that. Razor is an emitter. Emitters and transmuters should be about equally skilled at using enhancement techniques, based on their proximity on the nen map. But there's a good amount of evidence that Razor's physical power surpasses Hisoka, although he's a bit less impressive than someone like Uvogin. Hisoka only ever tries to avoid the ball when it's been thrown by Razor, and he's one of the members of the team who acts like getting hit by it directly would be life-threatening. Even the weaker Nen beasts that Razor can summon seem to be able to rival Hisoka in athleticism alone. The reason Razor has an advantage when it comes to physical prowess is that he obviously has more of a focus on enhancer techniques than Hisoka, who's more so the type to fight with his head than rely on brute force. This advantage doesn't necessarily mean Hisoka would lose to Razor, as it is Hisoka's quick thinking which ultimately outsmarts Razor in the end. Otherwise, Razor would have won the battle of endurance through his physique, although he lost the match either way. Since we're on the topic of strength, let's bring up the Uvogin comparison again. So, how does Hisoka stack up compared to Uvogin? Hisoka is ranked 3rd in arm wrestling in the troupe, below Uvogin and Finks, but above Franklin and Phaeton. A pretty impressive ranking, and some might argue that Hisoka could maybe rank as high as 2nd if he was holding back in that first contest. But Uvogin is clearly the strongest. Conventional weapons of war are essentially useless against his absurd sturdiness, and his offensive power seems somehow more ridiculous. Then there's the fact that Gon, a much younger enhancer, has impressed Hisoka with his feats of physical strength in the past. So it's safe to say that Uvogin probably surpasses Hisoka in strength, speed, endurance, pretty much anything that has to do with musculature. Which is a very relevant observation, because with Emperor Time, Kurapika is shown to be close to Uvogin in most of these stats, if not all, with maybe the exception of endurance. Based on their fight, maybe you could say Uvogin is a little stronger and Kurapika is a little faster. However, without Emperor Time, Kurapika is a conjurer, and less physically gifted than Hisoka. So basically, for the physicality segment, Hisoka is much stronger than Kurapika without Scarlet Eyes, and much weaker than Kurapika with them active. Now, the topic of intelligence will be a bit controversial, I predict. These are both top tiers in the verse when it comes to intelligence, but Kurapika gets some downplay despite routinely outsmarting everyone in the Phantom Troop during the York New arc. And so, however I rule, I think some people in either camp may disagree. This is also the category that will be swayed the most by the context of the fight. Whoever sets the stage will have the advantage in the intellectual battle before the fighting begins in earnest. Thirdly, it's also somewhat difficult to compare them directly. Does Kurapika win because he tricked Hisoka when they were working together in York New? Does Hisoka win because of how he manipulated everyone, including Kurapika during the Hunter exam? He didn't expect what would essentially be a double cross, because they both wanted what was bad for the spider. On the other hand, that's exactly what allowed Kurapika to manipulate Hisoka. Hisoka failed to consider how Kurapika would act if he couldn't allow the two of them to fight. Hisoka was also later narrowly tricked by Chrollo, a person who has outright been defeated by the strategy of Kurapika in the past. Kurapika's victories against the Phantom Troop come as a result of his extreme preparation for dealing with them, but he also has a characteristically keen intellect when dealing with other groups totally unrelated to the troop. With all of that said, you could form an argument for Kurapika being a tier above Hisoka and Chrollo. There are probably some people who believe he is the smartest strategist in the verse, and I would say those people are not misguided. However, Kurapika's hollow victory against the troop isn't quite enough to give him a convincing win in this category. Simply put, Hisoka is no slouch in a deathmatch. It's difficult to devise a plan that he won't see through, especially if he knows your abilities. It's true that Kurapika could feasibly come up with a strategy to use Hisoka's personality flaws against him, but Hisoka could also feasibly do the same to Kurapika. So, I'm basically saying that I don't think it's a one-sided stomp in this category. When it comes to using deception in battle, Hisoka also uses many of the same tricks as Kurapika, and then some. Ultimately, I think it's a toss-up, but my opinion is that Kurapika might be a slightly better strategist because he takes things seriously, but Hisoka might be a slightly smarter fighter when it comes to battle IQ. As far as the category of mastery of skills goes, I think this will be a bit more straightforward, although we are again comparing two of the top tier in the verse. Hisoka is more skilled in hand-to-hand fighting, clearly. As for anime magic, Hisoka is undoubtedly a virtuoso in the basics of Nen, and his Hatsu are both masterfully efficient and versatile techniques. So calling him one of the best Nen users we see does seem fair. But comparatively, Kurapika's Nen is extremely complex, and even more versatile. To have mastered such sound techniques, with so few flaws, at such a young age is truly impressive, as is his ability to use each of them in the right moment. Even without Emperor Time, Kurapika's mastery of Nen is rivaling Hisoka. With it, he gains a number of more broken abilities. But his most impressive attribute, as far as his mastery of Nen goes, is his willpower. Nen is strengthened significantly by conviction, and no one has more than Kurapika. So as far as being able to use Nen, although Hisoka likely has much better fundamentals, it doesn't compete with Kurapika's attunement and commitment to Nen. Kurapika soundly wins this category in my thinking. But again, Hisoka himself is no slouch. Hisoka wouldn't fall for the invisible chains trick like Uvogin. Similarly, Kurapika would not be pulled around so easily by bungee gum like Gon. Both of our contestants are masters of using In during battle. It's practically second nature for them. Hisoka's abilities and battle experience would allow him to keep up even with Kurapika's impressive skill set. Now for the final category. Understanding of Nen. Similarly, I think this is pretty clear-cut. It's pretty much the opposite result of the last category. Kurapika is undoubtedly a genius whose understanding of Nen has nearly reached the pinnacle. The fact that he made use of his scarlet eyes to access all forms of Nen is proof that he understands not just his own abilities, but the broader limits of Nen. This is a key attribute for seeing through an opponent's abilities and concocting a useful plan for defeating them. In this category, Hisoka might just be number one in the verse. Obviously, Gon's dad is pretty steep competition, but seriously. This is at least supported by him creating the Nen personality quiz, which is quite accurate. He probably figured this out by killing so many Nen users of each type. So he obviously has a lot of experience with and a deep understanding of each branch of the Nen map. And Hisoka believes in the value of straightforward, simple Nen abilities. Because he knows that the trickier one's abilities are, the more vulnerable they are to someone who understands the tricks. And Kurapika's Nen is so deeply tied to his sense of self and his emotional state. It's also worth noting that Hisoka is very familiar with Kurapika. Why did I say it like that? Given that, one can imagine Hisoka creating a scenario where the Nen chains of vengeance that Kurapika made to drag evil down to hell end up dragging him down instead. This is precisely what Kurapika's Nen teacher warned him might happen. On the other hand, deciphering Hisoka's Nen abilities don't give you that much of an advantage in defending against them. They're so straightforward that they can't be planned around. This is how Hisoka has weaponized his deep understanding of Nen to become one of the deadliest characters in the Hunter x Hunter universe. So, the tally. The way I would grade them is as follows. Kurapika wins the Physicality and Nen Mastery categories, provided Emperor Time is activated, and he gets half points for the Intelligence category. Hisoka wins the Nen Understanding category. He also gets half points for the Intelligence category. With that, we can consider Kurapika to be our favorite, if these two were to fight right after the events of the anime. Now for my brief final word, I'll get into manga spoilers. Some may oppose the idea of this fight because Hisoka is no longer a member of the Phantom Troupe. But as we know, mechanically this would only mean Kurapika cannot use Chain Jail against Hisoka, and he does have another way of enforcing Zetsu on a victim, which isn't even his only win condition. Kurapika's Steel Chain would still be able to force Hisoka into Zetsu if the syringe is able to extract his aura. Plus, there's some ambiguity about how the restriction works for Kurapika since we haven't seen him fail yet. For example, Chrollo could reinstate Hisoka's membership of the Spider, either deceptively or actually. He could do this solely to make him more vulnerable to Kurapika, and it might work. It all depends on how things play out. It's more than likely that Chain Jail will safely work against anyone that Kurapika believes to be a member of the Phantom Troupe. But let's quickly talk about post-mortem Nen Hisoka. As we've witnessed, certain Nen user abilities will be able to activate after their death, and this post-mortem Nen is typically much more powerful than the Nen user was in their life. Hisoka died and came back, so does he or does he not have this post-mortem Nen buff? It does seem like after dying and reviving himself, Hisoka's abilities matured and became more potent. He's performing feats with bungee gum we've never seen before. I think this is meant to imply he's gained some new abilities. However, these new abilities could be the result of his willpower getting stronger after tasting total defeat. One thing is certain. His own quest for revenge against the Spider is giving him increased strength. So, does this change the answer? Frankly, there's not quite enough info. This new Hisoka might be stronger than Uvogin, but probably not. We also don't know the full extent of his new nen abilities. So the two categories we gave to Kurapika in this video would still belong to him based on what little we've seen of the post-mortem Hisoka. But that could change. That's all I had to say, folks. What do you think? Is my rubric useful for evaluating potential fights? Are my findings shallow? Tell me all about it in the comments. We've got more content coming soon and some even more exciting stuff in the works, so stay tuned. Till next time, friends. Same cot time, same cot channel.